welcome to my channel. I am Adam W. Rodriguez, and this is the Art of AWR. I am going to try to do something a little different today. I've been promising to do more art style videos for my last couple of wrap-ups, and I'm finally getting into it. My last video was a video about Hop Frog by Edgar Allan Poe. I just recently reread it. It was such a great story that I was inspired. So I ended up painting a piece. I used to do speed art pieces a long time ago, back when I was trying to do like an art style channel. But now I just kind of want to mesh all of my works together, starting with a foundation in literature and books, which is kind of where I start anyway, and building out to paintings and writing and stuff like that. So without further ado, I would like to first invite you to my channel. If you like videos about creativity, literature, etc., go ahead and subscribe. Maybe give this video a like and then hit that bell so that you get new notifications every time a new episode drops. All right, let's begin. I like to start with sort of an underlining, or at least in this particular piece, I like to start with a under layer of crayon. Crayon is really, really cool to use because it's got this kind of waxy, waterproof, consistency. So when I put it on the page, it acts as a border, because I want to have some like sharp borders with the ape's hair and the watercolors that I'm going to be laying on here later. So what this does is it sort of protects the boundaries, the lines, so that the watercolor doesn't bleed too heavy into the actual apes that I have hanging here from these chains. And what that ends up doing is just kind of making it a nice cleaner edge when the watercolors come falling in. Edgar Allan Poe has a couple of stories with orangutans in it. I think that it's pretty interesting. In the 1850s, this particular piece was written in 1849. It was the same year that Edgar Allan Poe passed away, on October 7th, which October 7th happens to be my birthday as well. So this was earlier in that year that he wrote this particular story. It's super short. It's a wonderful piece of literature. I think everybody should read it. It reads kind of like a Grimm's fairy tale, but it's so very Poe. It's a great revenge story. It's very satisfying watching this kind of deformed jester get the best of a bullyish king and his cabinet. Hop Frog is considered the very first evil clown in literature. It's a claim that I read a while back in an article, and I have been like kind of searching in vain trying to find other. See, yeah, you can see where the watercolor is trying to bleed into the orangutans, and it can't because of that crayon, that layer of crayon. It protects it. It protects those edges. You can see the red and the orange that I've put on the top hairs of the orangutans, and so that yellow isn't really bleeding into it. Although I want a little bit of yellow on there to kind of show the light glare of the torch that Hop Frog has there. So it's kind of a spread of yellow light, and you'll see, you can see right now, like there's some edges of the apes themselves where I put a little bit of the yellow on there as well. This particular story is set in a time when, you know, there's a monarchy of some kind. The actual kingdom that Hop Frog is is enslaved by is very nebulous in the story itself. So you don't know, is this the king of Britain? Is this the king of France? Is this the king of... We really don't know. It's not specified in the story itself. He's just some sort of generic tyrannical king, and that king has a love of practical jokes, which is why he keeps Hop Frog around. Hop Frog is a master practical joker, so the king takes his counsel all the time when the king wants to have a laugh. But the king also abuses Hop Frog. He treats him poorly, and honestly, Hop Frog kind of takes it, just for the comforts that he does have. The last straw, however, is when the king starts to abuse Hop Frog's friend, Trapetta, with a T, Trapetta, who is also a dwarf from whatever nation Hop Frog is from. And when the king abuses her, in that he throws a goblet of wine in her face, which he appeals to the king to stop abusing Hop Frog. And then Hop Frog's teeth chatter, and the king hates the sound of it. He's like, "What the heck is that?" And Hop Frog says, "Oh, yeah, it must have been like some weird ambient noise." But it was truly his teeth chattering. That was it. That was the final straw. And then Hop Frog devised a practical joke of the fatal kind, and the king, the tyrannical king, paid the price. Yeah, you see, because there's a lot of reddish colors in this, I decided to add the green to the art piece, and I think it really helps the reds on the apes and Hop Frog just kind of pop a little bit more. These are complementary colors, so they just kind of blend well with one another. I think it's just kind of appealing for the eyes. Now, I usually like to go in with a lot of the blacks and darks at the end, so that it kind of like helps to make all the lighter stuff pop. As you can see here, kind of around the eyes and in the mouths and stuff like that, just to make the mouth hole, the interior of the mouth a little deeper, and the eyes a little bit more pronounced. I think it adds to the horror effect. And it's all very, very cartoony. That is my style. I would consider myself more of a cartoonist in that regard. I can do some kind of basic realism, but realism is really not my bag. I prefer cartoony style works, and I like to do varying degrees of realism in my cartoon works, but yeah, I'm not a hyper realist. I can't, or really a realist to that effect. I like to branch into surrealism a little bit art-wise, and that's when I'm trying to be like super accurate and stuff like that. But cartoons have always been a big, big part of my life. I love comic books. I love stuff like that. So cartoony art is very satisfying, and yeah, it's a big part of what I do.
Viviamo nei lieti colici che la bellezza infiora, e là fuggevo l'ora s'inebria voluta. Viviamo nei dolci fremiti che suscita l'amore, poiché quello che ha il cuore.
Yeah, I like to use the blacks as sort of a combination of some of the shadow work, but I also like to use it to sort of pronounce some of the edges of things, pronounce like the hair and the fur and stuff like that. It's a very, very useful tool, yeah, adding the darks. I think it makes everything pop a little bit more. And it goes toward that whole kind of cartoon element that I really appreciate in my artworks.
Follia nel mondo ciò che
In the actual story, Hop Frog, the king, one of the ways he likes to abuse Hop Frog is by making him drink wine. Hop Frog hates drinking wine because it makes him get drunk like really, really fast. He has like super low tolerance, and it upsets him when he is drunk, and he, which I think is interesting because there's this cool parallel where Edgar Allan Poe himself was a guy who would get really, really angry when people would ask him to drink with him because he struggled very much with alcohol, and it affected him a little bit differently than some folks. The way he died, some people think that it had something to do with complications with alcoholism. Although there have been all sorts of weird theories about how Edgar Allan Poe passed away. So there's an ongoing theory that's had some headway that he actually died of rabies, just like degenerative brain malady where, he slowly kind of spiraled into madness. And here you can see that I like to take a pen. I do everything in pen, before I begin painting it. But once I've got like a whole bunch of paint laid out on the paper, I like to go back and do a little bit of texturing with pen. If you can, you probably can't see it as well here in the speed video, but I'll show a close-up later on. And you'll be able to see some of the texturing I'm doing with the fur, with the pen. I'm working on the teeth a little bit more to give them a little bit more detail, a little bit more texture. Texture is really the main goal when I come in with the pen afterwards. I'll probably do a little bit of work on the chains. But the apes mainly, they could use a little bit of extra texture, right? The cool thing is so Hop Frog convinces this king to dress himself up and all of the members of his cabinet as orangutans, and he wraps them up in tight cloth, linen cloth, slathers them with tar, and then takes flax and puts it all over their bodies. Right, so you got like tar, flax, and linen. It's all very, very flammable stuff, right? And he makes them parade into this masquerade ball, upsetting all of the guests because these costumes are so well made and so realistic. But the apes are all chained together, and Hop Frog kind of leads them in. And people are all just like freaking out because there's all these wild animals in the middle of the ball. Earlier in the preparations for the ball, Tripetta and Hop Frog have removed the chandelier from the big chain that's hanging from the ceiling. They say that the candles are dripping wax all over the guests. But Hop Frog leads this procession of people disguised as orangutans into the center of the ball. He takes the chain from the chandelier and attaches it to the chain that is attached to all of the people in ape costumes. He then hoists all the people in the ape costumes upward towards the ceiling. So now they're just like hanging there, right? And Hop Frog is a guy who's extremely acrobatic, right? He's a great climber as well. He's got very, very strong arms because his legs are deformed. That's why they call him Hop Frog, because when he tries to walk, he has this kind of strange kind of leaping style to the way he, moves. But anyway, like I said, he's this kind of acrobat with very, very strong upper body. So he's very good at climbing. He climbs on top of these apes. He attaches himself to the chain just above them with a torch in his hand. And he's making this big spectacle, right? And all the people that are attending this ball think that this is all just part of the show, because Hop Frog is this entertainer. He's the king's jester. And he's talking about how he's going to unmask these creatures and all this kind of stuff, right? Then he takes the torch, puts it down on top of these guys wearing all this flammable stuff, and sets them on fire. The king and all of his advisors are incinerated in front of all of these people during this masquerade ball. And what makes it even better is Tripetta has locked all of the doors. So everybody is like locked in while these people burn before their very, very eyes. And it's pretty freaking awesome. Now, Grimm's fairy tales can be pretty grim and dark, but I would say that this is a Grimm's fairy tale style story, but with the excellent poetic language that Edgar Allan Poe uses. And honestly, it's not a very difficult piece to read. It was one of the last things that he did. Sometimes when I read Poe, the language can be a little bit difficult. There's a lot of referencing that I don't understand, some turns of phrase that are, kind of outdated. But this one was very, very simple to read. It's one of those that I think a younger person can read pretty easily. And it's quite frightening. It's a great short horror tale for Halloween, and it's one of my favorites. Hop Frog climbs up to the roof of the building after setting fire to the king and all of his men, where Trippetta is waiting for him, and they together escape. And I think it's a wonderful tale of a low caste slave, a deformed slave, bringing low the highest of the high, the king and all of his councilmen, who are tyrannical bullies, brought low, brought to cinder, as in Cinder, cinders, ashes, just old blackened bones. You gotta love it, folks. You gotta love it. That's it. We're Hop Frog, the video, the speed arts. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making this. I like to be able to break up my formats a little bit so not everything is too all the same, too formulaic. If there's particular pieces you might like to see, make suggestions there. I'd like to read more books, and books that have inspired you. Put pictures in your brain, that kind of thing. Or you think books that are like wonderfully descriptive that would inspire me to paint stuff. Make suggestions. I'd love to hear them. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been The Art of AWR, and I will see you next time. Ciao.